right, folks, time for Roland Martin Unfiltered. On today's show, multiple bombs were mailed to President Barack Obama, Hillary and Bill Clinton, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Eric Holder, and former CIA Director John Brennan. Trump and the GOP leadership condemning the bombs, but many people are saying, wait a minute, they were raising the rhetoric. We'll talk about it with our panel as well. Also, I was on Megyn Kelly's Today Show, NBC, talking about her comments on yesterday with regards to blackface. Now, some people said, why are you doing that? I'll explain, plus we'll show you how it went. Also, victory for democracy in Georgia as a federal judge orders election officials to notify voters rejected by the state's restrictive exact match program and give them a chance to vote. Also in Georgia, some people voted for Stacey Abrams, and the voting machine records her opponent, Brian Kemp. We'll tell you exactly what happened. Also, last night there was a debate between Abrams and Kemp. We'll show you some of what took place in that particular debate as well. Also, folks, on today's show, Niecy Nash has some practical advice for all these white folks who keep calling 911 on black folks. Y'all are going to get a kick out of this one, folks. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
The FBI, they are investigating pipe bombs mailed to a number of Democrats in this nation, including President Barack Obama, former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, also former Attorney General Eric Holder, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and former CIA Director John Brennan. That was sent to CNN, even though he's a contributor on MSNBC. This follows yesterday a bomb being found in the mailbox of liberal donor George Soros. Of course, all of these folks, what do they have in common? They're Democrats and frequent critics of Donald Trump. And remember, it is Trump. He is often called Congresswoman Maxine Waters having dumb and low IQ. He has led the chance of lock her up of Hillary Clinton, and Republicans and Trump have gone after George Soros, blaming him for anything that happens on the left. Now, again, remember, John Brennan has been a serious critic of Donald Trump. But here's what we know and don't know. There is no known motive as to who is behind these pipe bombs. Folks on the right are already yelling and screaming, saying Democrats literally are doing this to ramp up their side to vote. Liberals are saying it's all about Donald Trump's rhetoric. Let me say this to the left and the right. Shut the hell up. You don't know who is behind any of these bombs. It is stupid. It is asinine to have a conversation right now about who is actually responsible for these bombs. We don't know if they are Middle Eastern. We don't know if they are Muslim, if they are white domestic terrorists. We don't know if they black, Asian, Latino. Nobody knows who it is. So my response to both sides, shut the hell up and let authorities do what they do to find out who is responsible for sending these packages, these unmarked packages, to these individuals. Now, Congresswoman Maxine Waters released this statement, quote, I have been informed by U.S. Capitol Police that my Washington, D.C. office was the target of a suspicious package that has been referred to the FBI. I am appreciative of the law enforcement entities who intercepted the package and are investigating this matter. I unequivocally condemn any and all acts of violence and terror. Now, of course, Soros, the package was in his mailbox yesterday. Today, officials confirmed exactly what that it was actually a pipe bomb. this morning, when I was in New York to do Megyn Kelly's show, shortly after 10 o'clock, that's when word came out with regards to the package being found in the mailroom at CNN. NYPD cleared the building, moved everybody out as well. Then we found out that a package was delivered to the home of Bill and Hillary Clinton, as well as to the Washington, D.C. office of former President Barack Obama, and then later Attorney General Eric Holder. Initially, there was a report saying a package was sent to the White House. That was simply incorrect. And so again, the FBI is investigating. Earlier today, Donald Trump at a ceremony at the White House that dealt with the opioid crisis, he addressed this issue as well. Sarah Huckabee Sanders sent out several statements as well. And so again, we don't have any idea exactly who is behind this. My panel today, of course, joining me here is Dr. Julianne Malveaux, an economist and president emerita of Bennett College, also A. Scott Bolden, an attorney and former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party, and Monique Presley, principal of the Presley Law Firm. I wanted to say off the top, no one knows what the hell is going on because, again, you got folks on the right who are yelling and screaming, trying to say Democrats gin this whole thing up, and they're behind it. You got folks on the left who are saying it's Trump and his rhetoric. This reminds me of what took place with Congresswoman Gabby Giffords when she was almost assassinated in Arizona. People immediately went to the rhetoric of Sarah Palin and others, when in fact we found out it was a mentally deranged guy who had been targeting her. Look, I understand hyperpartisan. I understand there's an election in 13 days, but seriously, both sides should shut the hell up.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right about that, Roland. I think that there's so many things going on right now, nationally and internationally, that it could be anybody. It could be an international threat. It could be a domestic threat. I think it's really overreaching and adds to the vitriol when people decide, you know, whatever the Republicans say, I don't pay them any mind, and the Democrats need to hold their fire.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I do think that the vitriol on the political side for both Dems and GOP lends itself to this type of targeting, simply because it may be misdirection, it may be the Dems, it may be the GOP, but the fact of the matter is that we're in political crisis in this country. For example, it could be the Russians. The foundation of political chaos that we've laid in this country lends itself to foreign laying this stuff out, or laying it out on Facebook or
Scott,
Twitter.
That's exactly why the Dems and the Republicans need to keep it nonpartisan. It could be Russians, it could be Iranians, it could be anybody.
Right. And at the end of the day, Monique, we don't know. We of course, we know what happened last year when of course, some pipe bombs were being sent in Austin, Texas. It was several days before the FBI was able to track that individual down who actually blew himself up when they found him. I mean, look, you can criticize the FBI all you want to, but they're damn good at their job. Let them do their job before folks are speculating and laying motive when no one has any information whatsoever.
Postal Service,
but
too.
There's
is really good.
Go ahead.
There are obvious causal connections, though. So it's one thing to say that we shouldn't speculate wildly. It's another thing to just notice that nothing was sent to the office of former President George Bush, either of them. It's obvious nothing was sent to Mitch McConnell's office. It's kind of obvious, you know, that Clinton's, Obama's, and Maxine Waters and Eric Holder are people who are key targets of this president. So whether it's someone who is a supporter of Trump who is deranged, or whether it's the Russians who are using it, the causal connector that is obvious is that they identified the people who he targets the most. And that's not something that we can even debate. That's just clear on its face.
And I think, look, I think we could also, again, I think you can also have an analysis as it relates to, well, first of all, the CNN package was marked for John Brennan, even though he doesn't work at CNN. He's a contributor for MSNBC and NBC.
And what was the return address?
Huh?
What was the return address?
The return address for Eric Holder was Debbie Wasserman.
Debbie Wasserman.
They all had
Debbie Wasserman.
Right.
So there was misdirection.
Right. So you have that. But the other thing that you also, I think, have here is like, look, when Donald Trump comes out and says we need to unify, first of all, you of all people, okay, now I can criticize that. okay, because it's ridiculous to have him come out and say that when he has been the leading voice in his rallies. In fact, he has a rally tonight. The question is, what is he going to say tonight? What language will he use? Will he be so over the top? Last night, when he was in Texas, he said Beto O'Rourke, he should be in a jail cell. And so I would hope, out of all the people who are commenting on this, that he listened to himself. And for anything else, because again, when you're the president of the United States, how you behave also gives other people the right. Look, the story of the guy from Southwest Airlines who got arrested for groping a woman, and when he got arrested, he said, "Why are you arresting me? The president said we can grab a woman by her vagina."
Yeah, see.
Did he actually say that?
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yes.
you see,
I missed
words-
that story.
That was his.
Yeah, that was his response.
That was his. That was his
police.
response to why he did it.
And see, words matter,
Yes.
and you can't.
And actions
you
matter.
You can't say that I have no responsibility for the manifestations of people who act on these words. Everyone doesn't intellectualize Donald Trump and have these very intelligent debates and take the president, whether it's for its worth or to say that he's obnoxious. On the other hand, you've got to be responsible for how others are processing your words, because
Yes.
there may be a handful who will take your words to heart and want to prove to themselves and to Donald Trump that they're serious about attacking these Democrats.
Well, you know, there has been a decrease in civility since this man has been elected to public office. We have seen it.
Led by him.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
He's
But
uncivil.
we have seen this decrease in civility in our schools with little children chanting "Build a Wall"
Yes.
at their Latino classmates.
Right.
with,
Actually, that happened the day after the election.
yes.
Yeah.
So he has empowered an incivility. And so, although, I mean, I do agree with Roland that we can't talk about the bombs, we do need to talk about the way that he has talked about body slamming journalists, giving kudos to that guy who did it, the way that he talks about Latino people, the way that he talks about us, even the way that he talked about Omarosa. No Omarosa fan here, but you do not call a black woman a dog. And so when you see these white women,
Or a woman horse face.
exactly.
I mean, that's all promotes
When
negative
you
behavior.
see these white women, though, then calling 911 on little black children, I believe that some of this behavior is motivated by someone who believes that people of color are inherently dangerous. So when a no-butted white woman, no booty, and she's going to say that a 9-year-old grabbed her non-booty and calls 911 on the child, I mean, this is absurdity. But we see these cases again and again and again. It's only about the ability to demonize the black
But
body.
he gives license to it.
Well, that's-
he sends a message that it's acceptable, and that's hurting America. Whatever political party
Right.
you are,
And so
whatever
again,
race you are.
And look, first of all, he has no moral authority.
Right,
At the end of the day,
none.
Monique,
None whatsoever.
he has no moral authority. But this is also where it requires people in his own party to also check him,
Well,
which they're frankly afraid
They refuse
to.
to.
Go ahead.
Leadership is influence. And what we've seen with this election is, like it or don't like it, this man who is the 45th president has influence. And he has utilized his influence in order to lead people down a path that, as you say, is dangerous for America. But when I look at his rallies, I try not to listen to the whole thing. I just want enough to know what is said. I prefer the transcript. It's not his words that bother me. It is all of the people behind him and in front of
reaction.
him
Right.
cheering
Yeah. It's
about
cult-like.
Yep.
those
It is
words.
cult-like.
That is what is dangerous.
but what
if
they've
you
done-
have one crazy man who's screaming to the rafters, lock her up, if you have one crazy man screaming lock her up and he gets 10,000
Thousands, yes.
other people to do it, knowing full well somebody out there is deranged enough to take the things
Well,
that he's saying
or could be.
seriously.
Final comment on this topic before I got to move on. Go ahead.
You know, when you've seen his rallies, you've seen him attack people. So he's given people permission to attack people. When the people at the rally during the election, he said I'll get you out of jail if you jack them up. That is incendiary.
Right.
That's incendiary behavior, which is unacceptable for a president of the United States.
Talk about behavior, folks. Last night we talked about Megyn Kelly, her comments yesterday on her Today Show dealing with the issue of blackface. I said while we were live on the air, I got a phone call from one of her producers to actually come on the show. And so we were back and forth last night and actually barely made the flight to get there. And so today on her show, we had a second part of that conversation. And of course, as Megyn Kelly, they also invited Amy Holmes, who has a show on PBS, who is a black female conservative, to discuss this. It was an interesting conversation. And there were a lot of people who were texting me who were saying, don't do it, don't go. This is a PR stunt, don't save her. But I thought about what Maya Angelou said to me a month before she died. And we had a conversation in the national when they had a birthday party for her at the African Museum, the Smithsonian African Museum. And what's interesting is we were talking. She said something about being a teacher, and I said, "Well, my brother and my sisters are teachers." She says, "No, you're a teacher." She says, "You use the medium to teach and educate people." And so that's why I went. And so we're going to show you the whole segment. Then we'll discuss it with our panel as well. So this is the conversation we had this morning on the 9 a.m. hour of Megyn Kelly today on NBC.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Megyn Kelly, and I want to begin with 2 words. I'm sorry. You may have heard that yesterday we had a discussion here about political correctness and Halloween costumes. And that conversation turned to whether it is ever okay for a person of one race to dress up as another. A black person making their face lighter or a white person making theirs darker to make a costume complete. I defended the idea, saying as long as it was respectful and part of a Halloween costume, it seemed okay. Well, I was wrong, and I am sorry. One of the great parts of sitting in this chair each day is getting to discuss different points of view. Sometimes I talk and sometimes I listen. And yesterday I learned. I learned that given the history of blackface being used in awful ways by racists in this country, it is not okay for that to be part of any costume, Halloween or otherwise. I have never been a PC kind of person, but I do understand the value in being sensitive to our history, particularly on race and ethnicity. This past year has been so painful for many people of color. The country feels so divided, and I have no wish to add to that pain and offense. I believe this is a time for more understanding, more love, more sensitivity, and honor, and I want to be part of that. Thank you for listening and for helping me listen too. Roland, I did listen yesterday, and what was very clear in what I read and what I heard is that the history here, when it comes to that term and this issue, is deeply disturbing.
I think the problem is for African Americans, we know the history, and too many white Americans don't know or won't accept it. When the reality is, it is American history, yours and mine. When you look at blackface, white entertainers wore blackface to mimic African Americans, to caricature African Americans. When you look at the minstrel shows, black entertainers were forced to wear blackface because whites did not even want to see the humanity of black people, so therefore they had blackface. Last night, I looked at Spike Lee's 2000 movie Bamboozled, which dealt with this. And they actually, the Jada Pinkett Smith character actually talked about exactly how they created it. And what they did was they poured alcohol on 2 corks, burned it to a crisp, mashed it to a powder, added water, and mixed it to a thick paste, and then applied it to the faces of black people. Then they would take red lipstick and put it on the lips, but then on the outside of the lips to create this image. But this thing went beyond just that. You look at the Jim Crow Museum that's at Ferris State University, where this is American history, where black people have been assaulted in magazines, television, radio, all of these images that have continued for centuries and then, of course, decades, going up to the 1960s and to some degree in the 70s, and we still see it present day. And so this is American history. The problem is too many of us grew up learning his story and not actual history. And that's the problem that we have to accept. And when we are grown, when we are educated, we have to go beyond what we were taught, what we learned in our households, and say, I better be fully aware of real American history as opposed to being in denial about what actually took place in this country.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece of it is that seeing a white person darken her skin, even for a costume, today evokes that past.
Well, absolutely it does. It does, because you're speaking to, again, the history. Look, if you want to dress up like James Earl Jones and come into America, somebody sent me a photo, You can put the costume on. You don't have to darken your face. We have to deal with also the reality of colorism in this country, that the American beauty standard since we were created, because this is about whiteness, okay? If we really want to be honest, America was created to be a white nation. The beauty standard was a blonde, blue-eyed white woman. And so black women have had to deal with the critique of their hair, their lips, and their hips, and all of that. And so when you have to deal with that, you're understanding how deep this thing is. This is the 50th anniversary of King's assassination, the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, but also the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report, which said there were 2 white Americas, 1 white, 1 black. Most black folks who even came into journalism came in after the Kerner Commission, which was all based upon race riots. And so media, the reason this story just boomeranged all around is because media has been the main driver of these racist caricatures throughout American history, and that's why it's such a huge story. People don't know, no one wants to talk about Bill Cosby these days. But the reason there was a Black Stuntmen Association is because Bill Cosby was standing next to, when he was doing I Spy, and they had a scene, an action scene, and it was a white man who was putting on blackface to be his stunt double. Bill Cosby said, what? No. Y'all don't go hire somebody black. That's what led to the creation of the Black Stuntmen Association. There was a documentary that was done on them. That was in the 60s. This is American history. We live in constant denial. Today, we're dealing with Confederate statues and monuments, and people are saying, well, okay, this is really no big deal why you're upset. But we have to recognize, over the last, look, I'll be 50 years old November 14th. How many universities have we seen where they've had thug parties and ghetto parties where white fraternities and sororities dressing up in afros and blackface and wearing grills and putting on big chains to mimic African Americans? Well, you want to mimic a rapper, mimic the white rappers out there, dress up like Eminem. But no, that's not exactly what is done. That is a caricature. And when you have that constant assault, what people don't understand is that black people in America next year will mark the 400th anniversary of the first 20-odd Africans arriving in this country in August of 1619 in Virginia. For 399 years, this constant assault, this degradation, and this demeaning of how we look and how we act. We are just 50 years removed from Dr. King's assassination. In 25 years, Megyn, we will be a majority nation people of color. And white America has to come to grips with that, because now that's going to mean power. That's going to mean economics. It's going to mean that, look, that the notion of what is considered American values will have to be now looked at differently, because people of color will be also making that determination, not just white Americans.
How do we talk about race and our country's history with race and have a real conversation?
Here's the thing that we don't want to accept. This is what I call an informal gathering. No one person could control who sits in this audience, but we control who we eat lunch with. We control who we go to dinner with. We control who we invite to our houses. And if we really want to be honest, Americans live in silos. White folks stay with white folks, black folks stay with black folks, Latinos stay with Latinos, Asians with Asians, Native Americans with Native Americans. And it's rare when in voluntary situations, we actually cause ourselves, and I need to learn more about you. I need to understand you and where you come from, but also asking the question, I don't know. I worked with a guy, Tim Madigan, who grew up in Iowa, didn't see black people until he went to college. All these racial things happen. He never understood why black folks responded the way he did until he wrote the book on the Tulsa race riot. And then he began to interview, and he hears these stories of elderly black people kneeling in their homes and guns put to the back of their head, and they were killed based upon a lie, and how this whole town was destroyed. Tim said, Roland, for the first time, I then understood why black people felt the way they did. And he said, as a white man, I had to force myself to own up to my lack of understanding, my lack of history. And I would say the same thing, Megyn, whether it's you, whether somebody sitting in this audience, being honest that, wait a minute, how did I grow up? And have to go inside of yourself and say, what was I taught? What did my parents teach me? What did my friends teach me? And do I allow people to say things around me that have racial implications and I say nothing? Because I don't really want to upset the apple cart. Let me look at who's in my office. Who's on my staff? Who are executives? I've been in media since I was 14 years old. One of the fundamental problems we have, that white men still run media across the board. I mean, do understand, and this is just understand how this thing impacts us. When I sat with Ken Jouts, executive vice president at CNN, I did a pilot. He literally, I used the word brother. I was interviewing the guy who later became the first black president. And I talked about health care, and I said, man, that really hurt a brother having to file for bankruptcy because of health insurance. He said to me, hey, be careful using the word brother because we don't want to alienate white viewers and being too ethnic. And I'm going, but that's my story, and I was talking to a black man. But Glenn Beck could use the word brother, and it's perfectly fine. And the fact that he would say that to me in that context is, wait a minute, hold up. Why can't I just be me? Why is it that, okay, you're too black, Roland? Well, how am I too black? Because I am black. And so we have to understand how deep this goes because now it impacts raises, it impacts promotions, it impacts who we work with. And so we, I think, are in total denial of how deeply embedded race is in the DNA of America and how it impacts so many things that are done in this country. And if we have a discussion and just be honest, and somebody says, look, I don't know, share with me, educate me. That also, I think, what changes it.
And on a personal level, for all of us to challenge stereotypes that we may have about different racial and ethnic groups and say, wait a minute, is that fair, the way that I'm relating to other people or making assumptions? That's a part, I think, of the journey. But the last point is, I can play Diana Ross. I'm sorry, Megyn, you can't.
No. Megyn, you can. No, Megyn,
don't.
You can play Diana Ross just like you can play any other character. But you just put on a gown, grab a fan, and then have big hair, you're fine. But that's the mistake that we make when we say, oh, I want to cross that line. Yeah. There are lines, and there's history, and there's pain. And when we acknowledge that, then we can learn and grow from it. But as long as we as Americans live in denial and act as if that stuff does not matter, then we will continue to have this problem in the next 400 years.
Listen, well said. All I can say is, for my part, I have been listening and learning, and I'm grateful to both of you to have this conversation here on the set today, and to those who reached out to me via Twitter. I've heard you too. Thank you. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back.
Now, of course, that was the edited version. We have the full version of the conversation on our YouTube channel, so go to youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. All right, let's turn to our panel. Your thoughts?
Thank God yesterday she was wrong about it, because that meant today you had an opportunity to go before millions of people and give them the history of this country that they otherwise may have never, ever heard. I see it as a blessing that Megyn, with her ignorant self, is in the Today Show slot and needed to cure it, because in the curing of it, she made way for a conversation that had to happen and information to be provided around the world. So, to me, well done, Roland.
Scott, you were talking about you watched this with some of your law partners?
I did. A number of them. And CNN is kind of on, but I happen to have it just on NBC. And I was on a phone call, and they were in my office with me. And NBC, and I saw your face. I had to get off the phone. And I am deeply grateful that you chose to go. And I mean that. You and I go back and forth a lot, but I got to tell you, I've never been prouder. And here's the thing. You did that interview. That was your interview. Don't miss the move now. That was his interview.
Yeah.
Megyn was just there, right? And he had a broad-based audience to share in a thoughtful, cogent, intelligent, African-American, intelligent-based representation of a lot of points. The most important point I think you made, and I talked about this as the layperson presenter at Reed Temple this past weekend, about the need for a national dialogue on race in this country to reconcile the issue of slavery, Jim Crow, Ku Klux Klan, this history issue that you talked about. And it needs to come from the top. I challenge the AME Church to lead that effort, but I challenge our government officials, not this government that we have in place now, to lead that discussion. America has never reconciled itself on race.
No.
And won't.
It's never reconciled what it promises to be and what it is, because we will not have that dialogue. White people think they've paid their dues because we've got black billionaires, and black people they took so much from us that we don't know who we are, actually. I mean, when we talk in our employment places about black issues or black this, a lot of people that look like you and me, Roland, we lower our voice. Other ethnicities don't lower their voice
Because
when they
we've
talk
been
about
conditioned.
trained.
That's exactly.
And
But we've been
Julian,
trained.
No, hold on, hold on.
but follow me here.
Right.
So, finish your point, then I'm going to go to you.
Right, but we have been trained that way. And so we can't just continue to ignore this and act that the race issue in this country is gone away with time. We got to be comfortable and aggressive and make everybody else comfortable, black, white, yellow, and brown, talking about these issues.
Julian, last week I was in Indianapolis, and there was a State of Black Issues discussion that I moderated with Susan Taylor, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Michael Eric Dyson. And we're going to air some of that later this week and also next weekend, live stream the whole thing this weekend. And I talked about Dorothy Cotton, and she was over the Citizen Education Project with SCLC. Everybody focuses on, well, they trained them to go out. Well, no. In her book, she said, no, they brought people in. They wanted to see where they were mentally, how they view things, and they reprogrammed them
Yes.
to send them go out. The thing for me is, and look, I saw all the commentary. Oh, my God, she's 47 years old. She's a white woman. How does she not know? Which is all legitimate. But what I do think we have to understand is that there are white people in this country who literally are growing up, they don't see no black people. And there are black people who are living in spaces where they don't connect with white people. And what happens is, if you never ever sit and talk to somebody, you don't know what the hell's going on, because you can forget what the hell you learned in school. It ain't real history. It's a joke. And so we have to, I think, sometimes force that conversation, and yes, teach some folks.
Yes.
Well, teach some folks. I'll first of all say, Roland, I want to commend you. You did a brilliant job. I think it was really great. I'm happy that you mentioned Tulsa. You know, I'm doing some work on my book that'll come out whenever I finish writing it on Black Money, and there's a piece in there on Tulsa. And one of the things about Tulsa is there's a guy who's written about what he calls segregated memories. So in Tulsa, you have white people who do not believe that Greenwood was burned by crazy white people. They just don't believe it. And even if you show
know
them
about it, but
pictures,
they don't believe
they don't believe it. It's fiction. And you have black people who, as you say, they lower their heads, they've heard about it, they're ashamed about it. But the shame is about the way that we have been bludgeoned by stereotypes. And what I think was so valuable about what you said is that you really walked us through some of those stereotypes, some of the whole thing about blackface and how it actually distorted. And as a result of that, how if you go back to, like, my mom is 90, and she talks about when black women would not wear red because it was connected. That red is my favorite color, just the rebel in me. But it's connected to the way.
And you're a Delta, so that's the red in
Of
you.
course.
Gotcha.
Of course. But
And I'm a Kappa.
But yeah, dress like a Delta.
so-
Go ahead, Julian.
I do that.
But you know, but the point is that all of this,
Right.
so black women could never feel pretty.
Right.
So you know, they have these.
What was red connected to?
The exaggerated
The lip.
lip,
Oh, I see.
and all of that, and so black women did not wear red, and you would hear our grandmothers. Mothers say, you know, only certain kind of women wear red or purple. There were colors that we just weren't supposed to wear. Breaking the stereotypes down is important. But but both of y'all, because both of y'all make this point about conversation. You know, I'm the old head at the table. I mean, people keep talking about conversation. Bill Clinton talked about conversation. I want reparations.
But here's the piece. The Bill Clinton conversation. But here's the piece, though. The Bill Clinton conversation was a fake conversation, and I called it fake then because what they did was they wanted a nice conversation. They didn't want to be controversial. When Megyn asked that question, and this is what I said to her and the staff off air. Guess what? That conversation is going to end up being raw. It's going to end up being real. It's going to end up being where folks are going to be upset. And it takes somebody saying, I'm not going to cuss you out, but I'm going to sit here and we're going to have the conversation. Because there are things that happen every day. Like literally, the point I made about the guy at CNN. I got a text message, somebody said, Roland, that was petty, you shouldn't have brought it up. I said,
No, it's real.
I said, why? I
Oh,
said,
it's real.
I experienced it.
That's right.
And it was like, well, no one knows him. I said, that's the point.
Yeah.
The point is there are individuals who you don't know who say things, who are in positions of power.
Who replicate? No, and,
And actually what he said was, he said that, then he also said, I also showed it to my wife and she agreed. And I'm sitting there going, wow, the white wife agrees. And it was sort of like, okay.
That's better than you.
Now I'm going, now he didn't say, how did you get Senator Barack Obama to agree to shoot a pilot that will never air?
Right.
He didn't ask that question.
Right.
The first thing he said was, be careful using the word brother. We don't want to alienate white viewers.
yes, again.
Which causes me to then go, okay, well, when we actually have conversations, what are you thinking? And what's your thought process? What decisions are you making? And the reason I brought it up, because he's still there. He's still executive vice president.
making
He's still
decisions.
over
Yeah.
HLN. And I'm not calling him a racist. I'm saying by him raising that point, I then have to say, well, where's that coming from? Because if the white boy can say brother, but he's a Christian and that's fine, why can't I say brother?
Right, but
Roland,
the
I want to say one more
whitewashing-
thing really
Hold on,
quickly.
Monique, then you.
the whitewashing of our culture, that such that even when you have blacks in media, they're not supposed to be black. So we strip away the culture, or in the case of blackface, we exaggerate the culture. Those are the only two options that we've had in America.
And in fact, the
for-
blackface, as I pointed out, for when black people put it on, well, so they didn't actually have to see
Have
us
to
for
look at
real,
them. Right.
which happens, to your point, Scott, when it's lower your voice, change your clothes, what's your approach? So but basically what that says is, what the white values, we're going to strip you of your blackness. And we need you to walk like us, talk like us, act like us, go to the right schools, do the right thing, strip all of what makes us us. That's essentially the same as blackface.
And
Well, but it's
and
the
it's
Dunbar.
taught
And it-
by our elders, unfortunately,
Yes.
Well,
because they knew the only way we could advance was by taking on those attributes and characteristics and stripping ourselves.
No, the Bible-
Because
of
Julian,
our
I remember when Earl Graves,
Yeah.
when he put in Black Enterprise magazine, you gonna cut your dreadlocks.
Yes.
And there
that
was a big controversy.
That was
and
Brother,
he's
Brother Harvey at Hampton. Told the young people in business school they could not have dreads, they could not have twists. But a couple things. First of all, I was happy that you were with Megyn Kelly, but I'm not giving Missy a pass. You were there.
Oh, absolutely.
Perhaps she got it. I don't think she got it. I think she's a fake Jake human being who has used the term political correctness more than once, and even in that interview. The words PC should, if she was sorry, then she should have just been sorry. And she is sorry, like one of the sorriest pieces of journalism that I've seen in a while, seriously. I mean, that using PC is justification. Just leave that alone. Number two, to the mask, and I think it's really important, your point about how we have had to basically juggle the place between assimilating, accommodating, and being our black selves. I had a producer tell me once back in the day, Roland, when I was doing a lot of TV, did my hair grow? He said, you're very pretty, but you'd be much more attractive if you had longer hair. Does your hair grow? I said, hair growth is a human function. Everybody hair grow, and I cut mine like every 4 weeks. So, I mean, but to say that is like to dehumanize.
right, but it's
not
also, again, it's standards. And see, the reason I keep going back to the images part, because that museum I talked about, the Jim Crow Museum,
Yes.
it was Dr. Skip Gates who had that in his documentary, African Americans, I think Many Rivers to Cross, I think that was the name of it. And in that particular doc, so that was the first I heard of it. And what was amazing about the African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. It's on, if you actually,
Where is it?
So it's in Big Rapids, Michigan. Okay. So it's at Ferris State University. All of you folks who are watching, if you just Google Skip Gates and Jim Crow Museum, the clip will come up. And at this museum, they have just tons of artifacts, literally magazine ads. They have billboards. They have all of the little trinkets. And you see the protruding lips, the bugged out eyes, the pickaninny hair. You see all of that.
Derriere with black
So
women.
they lay out in this whole museum the continuum. And the director in his interview says to Gates that there's no other group in the history of America that has had the sustained assault on
Yes.
their looks, on their hair, on their psyche than black people.
Yeah.
No other group. No other group. And so you take that from the 1800s and then the 1900s. And then you go through radio. And then you have Amos and Andy. And then, of course, you have the maids in movies. And then Step and Fetch It. and the foot shuffling. And then you go through the demeaning characters in the 50s and then 60s. Then you go through the ghetto characters in the 70s. You go through the UPN show where they wanted to have the slaves and with Lincoln, it was a UPN show where they got canceled before it even came on.
They were going to say that enslavement never occurred. I mean, freedom never occurred.
Right, it was like
premise.
a setting of the White House, Lincoln president, and we got some slaves. Like, are y'all serious? And so then you go through all this. So you go through and how media played the role, because that's also what we constantly projected.
But Roland, let me jump in here, because I want to continue one thought you had about assimilation and what they've dictated to black men and women for assimilation in corporate America in 2018. If you do all of that, right, you are still only acceptable to a certain point.
Right.
There is still a glass ceiling, and they are still, the numbers of black CEOs and general counsels are still minuscule, comparatively speaking. And here's the thing they tell you is why, if you are acceptable, why you still can't get to the highest point. They will say he's too educated or she's too educated by half, too smart by half, too well dressed by half. He went to the best schools. He's got a ton of business. He has large clients. He has assimilated in corporate America at the very best levels that you have dictated to your white counterparts. And yet you are still only acceptable to a certain point. What are you to do? It is like we're caught in this political economic vacuum or prism or vortex that says do all the right things as your mom and daddy told you. You do that, and then you can only still get to a certain point, including compensation.
But that's assimilation. Now flip that thing to how it also causes us to also then have self-doubt about other black people.
Yes.
The number of people, and this happened to me numerous occasions, brothers, men and women, black, who literally said to me when we had News One Now, brother, when you gonna get you a show? And I was like, I'm on TV 5 days a week.
Right.
What do you mean?
Oh no.
And they literally said,
no.
No. They said a real show.
A real show.
And I said, what do you mean real show? They said, no, I mean like, CNN, MSNBC. I said, bruh. And so this is when Brian Williams was the evening news anchor of NBC. I said, bruh, do you realize that when Brian Williams comes to Washington, D.C. to broadcast the NBC nightly news, that Brian Williams sits in the same chair that I sit in? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a table right next to that chair, and there's 2 shelves. On the bottom shelf is a bristle brush and a mirror. That ain't for Brian. I said, that's mine. I said, the walls and the cameras in the control room are the same. I said, what you don't realize is we do the show at NBC News Channel in DC. I said, we send the signal through the fiber optic line the same way they do. I said, you believe that my show isn't real because it's on a black network. I said, when it's the exact same place that Brian Williams uses. And he looked at me like, oh my God, what the hell? So what happens is look, right here. I had a brother, people today, somebody said, well, you can't get a real show. And I said, really? Because you got a digital show.
Well,
and I said,
real?
wait a minute. I said, did you see the news today that NBC is launching, they launched today a new streaming channel? I said, did you see the news that CBS has CBSN, which is a digital channel? I said, did you see that Fox News next year is launching a digital channel? I said, so explain to me how it's bad that I have a digital show
Before.
but they all are launching digital shows.
So before they had theirs.
Again, how we think. So we're taking on. So we're degrading ourselves and saying that ain't good.
Well, Roland, it's just it's like what happens. What happens in
Go ahead and come back to
HBCU
you.
land, as you have our people. We have brilliant, wonderful, phenomenal colleges in HBCU land, and we have black people who say things like, You know, I wouldn't send my child to an HBCU. Your child, but some of your children need to be at HBCUs.
Right.
And HBCUs will provide the same level of education. If you look at a Howard, you look at a Morehouse, a Spelman, a Bennett, you know, the same level of education. And don't end me. You want to say in that chair? But the same levels of education that many other comparable schools do. So we really have been brainwashed. We have literally been taught that we are less than, and we have basically inculcated that. And there's no comprehensive way. I like what you said about the AME Church, but no comprehensive way for us to unpack that
Right.
to begin to talk about what's happened to us as a people.
Monique?
Yes, speaking of HBCUs, it's Howard Homecoming Week, so I'm going to need to see a sweatshirt. My point.
Whatever. I wear HBCU gear on Monday.
Okay, well,
This ain't Monday.
You still have time. You still have time.
Virginia State, I had it on Monday. Go ahead.
HU.
You know.
So my point is, you made to me the most critical point about the fact that in a very short time, the minority will be the majority. And all of these things are going to have to be figured out. I was at a conference over the weekend, and one of the things Bishop Jake said is the reason why we don't have relationship is because we don't visit somebody different than us. So if we take the time to visit Asian Americans, Caucasians, everybody,
Y'all too kumbaya for
if
me.
we don't silo, if we do not get out of our silos, then we will be the same as the white people have been to us.
Here's why I made that. But Julian, here's why I made that point. So I graduated from Texas A&M. A black woman with a black journalist conference. She comes up to me. She says, "Roland," I said, "I got to talk to you." I said, "Okay." She said, "I go to Texas A&M." She said, "You know, and I hear you talk about the university and how much, you know, you enjoyed your 4 years there." I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "But, you know, my problem is just that, you know, how we be received by the white students." I said, "Okay." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "So for instance, you know, we're going to Sabisa, which is our a major cafeteria." She said, "You know, the white students won't sit with us to eat." I said, "Okay." I said, "You ever sit with them?" She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "What I mean is, do you ever take your tray and literally walk over?" I said, "Do you ever take your tray and walk over and then sit down and say, 'How y'all doing? Anybody sitting here?'" She goes, "Why would I do that?" I said, "So help me out. You're asking white students to do what you won't do." I said, "Has it ever dawned on you that there's some white kids who go to A&M who have come from towns they ain't never seen black people?" I said, "And there's some black students who have come from communities in Houston and Dallas who ain't never seen there were white people." I said, "What is the harm of you sitting down and just talking to somebody?" She literally said, "That never crossed my mind." I said, "You can't ask of somebody else what you're unwilling to do."
That's right.
And so it's not kumbaya. It's just the reality that why can't I if I got someone who's Asian or Latino who's a woman, I have at some point I've got to get the hell out of just my spot and actually talk to
Roland,
somebody.
I don't fully disagree with you, but the kumbaya, let's have a conversation thing is played when you think about economic structure. See, I always come back to economic issues.
Got it.
When Monique talked about, well, if you don't go visit Asians or whatever, we're going to be the same. We're going to be the same unless we figure out how to deconstruct a capitalism that puts people at the periphery. It has nothing to do whether we have conversations or not.
But hold on.
We need to have
But by having the
conversations
conversation,
about money.
it doesn't- it has
we need
nothing-
to have economic conversations. We need to be in rooms and chambers of commerce and boards so that we can learn what that thought process is.
hold on,
The rooms that we are kept
and see,
out
I'm gonna give you the answer to that. You have some African Americans, Robert Smith, the brother who's a billionaire, who's been working with Reverend Al Sharpton on pension funds.
Okay.
And what they said is, they said, wait a minute, you got all these white boys who got hedge funds, and the public pension funds, teachers, firefighters, police officers, they are the biggest pension funds that drive money to hedge funds. Black hedge fund managers not getting the money. So what happened? Sharpton and Smith and others, they go sit down with Randy Weingarten, AFT, and NEA, and they say, now look, y'all got all these black teachers who are funding your unions. Y'all money are going to white hedge fund managers. They laid it out. Weingarten says, and her team goes, you know what, you're right. CalPERS, the California pension fund, $500 million. going to the black hedge fund. Black folks sat down with white folks.
Yes.
Explained to them, this is what's happening. How do we leverage? Y'all are using black funds. And they went, damn, that's a good point. You right. And so now they're saying, let's go to the other pension funds. So to your point, if we don't tell somebody that and show them and then say, now what y'all gonna do?
Right.
Well, that's very different than this go to somebody's house, have a conversation nonsense. Monique,
No,
with all due
I-
respect.
No. I
That's what you said. I'm
No,
quoting
I
you.
said if you don't
I'm
visit.
quoting
What I
you.
meant by visit was conversation. Spend
I'm quoting you.
time.
It's
spend time.
It's lightweight.
Right.
No, but here's the deal. But here's the deal, Julian.
Conversation is not.
If I got somebody
Ignorance starts at
white
home.
in the workplace,
Ignorance starts at home.
if I got somebody white in the workplace who don't understand what black men and black women are going through, and then if I'm able to enlighten them and educate them, then if they are in the room that I'm not in, if I've done my job, they then might become champions of it. They may not, but at least I've said, look, here's what's going on, and you may not have any idea about it, Scott, in a law firm. We've seen that where white lawyers are like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, and that's actually happening.
Yeah.
And you're going, yes.
And we got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with it.
Yes.
Now I got
And not making them comfortable.
Exactly. I got 35% diversity in the D.C. office of Reed Smith. I've been intentional, and our global managing partner and senior manager have been intentional about it. And we openly talk about race and gender, especially when it comes to pitching business. If we're going to pitch a piece of business to a large company and they've got great diversity or their leadership has diversity, whether it's women or people of color, why would we field an all-white male team to go see that company in 2018? So my partners have got to be comfortable about talking about, Scott, who do we have that does SEC work who's an African-American woman? We can't be uncomfortable about that because diverse ideas and diverse teams are better, stronger teams. And we have to be comfortable with that. And if I can make every one of my partners who doesn't look like me, male or female, comfortable about that, whatever office they're in, that's my job as managing partner.
And Julian, what I keep saying is I'm tired of parking lot militants. I'm tired of folks.
What is
who
a parking lot
A parking
militant?
lot militant is the person who, when you leave office, they buy the car and they saying, man, this need to happen and this need to happen and this need to happen. And then when they go in that building, you like, well, where your little parking lot militant ass go? Now you quiet. My deal is, look, I always said it. They're going to fire you anyway. Okay, so at least I'm going to say something while I'm there. And I'm saying if we're willing to challenge, to educate, take some folks out, enlighten some white boys on pay disparity, enlighten some folks and like, say, bro, you don't recognize it? All the folks on your team, white men? I'm just saying that a conversations, dinner, or lunch, it also builds relationships.
Exactly.
It could lead to change.
Professionally.
Final comment before I go to my next story about voting in Georgia.
My final comment is let's look at economic structure. All this talking.
Can you talk about economics during those conversations?
You can talk about
Okay,
economics, but Scott, the bottom line economic structural issue is less race than it is class and capitalism. And this is a conversation that nobody wants to have, is how you dismantle capitalism so that you basically distribute resources more fairly.
But I'm gonna give you this example. Hold up, I'm gonna give this example. Last one of what happens when you do educate somebody who's white, who's in power, who then can also do that. John Landgraf, the CEO of FX Network. He is sitting here going, look at numbers. 80+% of the showrunners of FX shows were white men.
Oh, wow.
John Landgraf sends an email, one email, to the entire network, and he says, I'm a white man, and I like white men. We talk, they friends of mine, but this ain't America. He said 50+% of America's women. He said the numbers who are Latino, who are African American, and this is changing. He says we have to change who is running the shows in our network. 6 months later, half of all shows on FX had people of color who were showrunners, or people of color or women. His deal was, I'm a leader. He said we have to change it. Now that's economics right there, because also who are showrunners, who are creators, And so Donald Glover's show, ATL, the other shows they have, that also changes the game economically. I still believe that, look, I don't assume a white person gets it. I don't assume a black person gets it.
That's right.
But I will say is, I'm at least had a conversation that if I can have an opportunity to enlighten you and empower you, you might get it or you might not. But at least I'm going to make the effort, and that can speak to economics. I don't believe in wasted conversations. I'm with you on the money part. But again, somebody's got to force it, and if it's going to be us, fine. But I'm not going to wait on somebody else to actually do it. Great conversation here, folks. Let's talk about what's happening in Georgia. A big defeat of voter suppression there when it comes to Georgia's exact match law. A federal district judge will issue an order tomorrow ordering Secretary of State's office to tell local election officials that they should not reject any absentee ballots due to an alleged signature mismatch. Instead, ballots should be marked provisional and would-be voters given pre-rejection notice and an opportunity to resolve the alleged signature discrepancy. That voters rejected using the aforementioned process should have the right to appeal, and that any absentee ballot applications where a signature mismatch is suspected should not be rejected either. Now, again, officials should instead provide a provisional absentee ballot to the absentee voter, along with information as to the process that will be followed in reviewing the provisional ballot. The injunction would apply to all absentee ballots and applications submitted in this current election, meaning it would apply to would-be mail-in voters that have already been rejected. Now, still issues in Georgia. The NAACP there has filed complaints with the State Board of Elections after it said it's heard from voters about problems with Georgia's touchscreen voting machines during early voting. According to the complaints, several voters attempted to select Stacey Abrams as their choice, but the machines instead chose Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who is, by the way, in charge of voting integrity in Georgia. Also, in other cases, voting machines showed ballots being cast before the person actually voted. Now, the latest polls are all within the margin of error, so every vote will really be important. Now, like last night, the candidates for governor of Georgia debated in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, as well as Ted Metz, the third candidate, plus Brian Kemp. And so Metz asked Abrams if she thought Kemp deserved a promotion to be governor. Her answer:
I would say that Mr. Kemp's record as Secretary of State, as a business owner, and as a legislator demonstrate that he does not deserve a promotion in the state of Georgia. This is someone who has to be held accountable to do his basic jobs. He's been sued by the military for refusing to allow soldiers overseas to cast ballots. He was sued by nonprofit organizations for his failure to process properly thousands of registrations, and a federal judge forced him to restore 34,000 illegally canceled registrations. He accidentally twice released the information of 6 million voters, made them liable for identity theft. And he owes $500,000 to a friend that he conveniently forgets that he owes. I think his record is one that causes great concern to me and to others. I'm running for governor because I have a proven track record of leadership. I have comprehensive plans for the future of Georgia, and I have a record I'm happy to stand on and stand beside. We have to have proven leadership in the state of Georgia that will hold itself accountable and will never have to be taken to court to do its job.
Yes, Ms. Abrams, you sort of have similar management problems with your own checkbooks. You know, you're carrying a $50,000 IRS debt. You owe $13,000 in business liens for unpaid unemployment insurance contributions. And you carry this debt while making hundreds of thousands of dollars annually and even lending your campaign $50,000. If you can't manage your own finances and pay your own creditors, can you be trusted to manage the state budget?
Given that he invoked me in his rebuttal, if I may respond. I very proudly take care of my parents, my niece, and my grandmother. I know that you can defer your taxes, but you cannot defer cancer treatment payments for your father. I owe taxes to the federal government, and I pay those taxes. I'm on a payment plan, I am current, and I have never walked away from my responsibilities. More than that, every time I have found out that there's a challenge, I've quickly responded. I've never had to be sued to do my job. And so I would say that my responsiveness is proof that I am not only a strong leader, but I have the right priorities. Georgia values that say put family first and take care of all of your obligations. I've never shirked my responsibilities, and I never will.
All right, I want to go to my panel real quick because I want to show you some polling data from NBC. Henry, go to my iPad. This is from Carrie Dan of NBC News. It is showing that Abrams is up plus 73 with African Americans. In Metro Atlanta, plus 53. Women plus 14. Kemp is up with whites plus 35, men plus 18, and plus 35 in rural. But here's what is interesting here when you go to this right here. Right now, it's running 84-11 among African Americans. Some people are very surprised by the 11% voting for Brian Kemp, who are African American, 84% going for Stacey Abrams. But what you also look at, if you go all the way down, he's leading her 66-31 rural, but she's been making the effort to make sure you close that gap. Now, according to their numbers, African-American numbers are not what they expect. African-Americans should be 25% of the folks who are going to be voting. And so what we're hearing is there still is some room for black turnout to increase over the next 13 days to support Abrams.
She is she's hot. She's great. But there are challenges. We just talked about our own internal conditioning. And I've talked to a couple of African-American Republicans down that way who, Stacey, no way, they're stuck on the same thing that Kemp is stuck on about her student loans and other things. She's got a powerful operation. A lot of national folks are going down there. I think she stands a good chance, and I think she handles herself extraordinarily well.
The fact that Georgia would vote for a president of the United States who has had multiple bankruptcies and came into office without revealing a single year of his taxes, but those same Georgia residents want to make this good governor candidate explain $50,000 of debt. It's ridiculous.
It's a
It is absurd.
But her Republican opponent has not only gone bankrupt, he's done all kinds of things that make her look like a financial literacy pro.
Is in the middle of a lawsuit right now. Here, listen, I think she's in good shape, but the bottom line is you still have to get people to the polls. You can register them, you got to get them to the polls. I keep hearing about this tremendous ground game, so two things win for her. One, a ground game that counts votes around the state and deliver those votes as they count them. And then secondly, the enforceability of this court order. Because we know federal court orders make sense, but that our Republican friends and those on the ground don't always follow them.
We talk about the importance of young voters. In this particular poll here, it shows under 30, Abrams 55%, Kemp 42%. She's only up plus 13 there. Of course, those voters also matter. And so what we're seeing is initiatives all across the country to get young folks to get out and vote. My next guest, Angie Jean-Marie, is the director of #VoteTogether, who's actually trying to make this thing into a big old party. She joins us right now. So Angie, tell us about these parties that y'all have been organizing to begin to teach people, to organize people, and to get them to go out to the polls in these states.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you, Roland. So Vote Together is a national nonprofit. It's a nonpartisan campaign that aims to increase voter participation in the upcoming elections by making voting fun and celebratory. We have thousands of events happening all across the country in partnership with local organizations, grassroots groups, getting out communities of color, young people, and other sort of disenfranchised voters. It's been really inspiring. We have a bunch of events happening this week, over 175 events. We're doing one event today in North Carolina with a band, a DJ, some food trucks, the sort of stuff that really gets people out and excited to celebrate their communities and celebrate voting.
First of all, are you still getting volunteers? How are you also organizing people? And are there particular states you're focused on, or is it cities all across the country?
It's really all across the country, but we have a lot of activity happening in North Carolina, Florida, in Los Angeles, in Pennsylvania as well. And we are really looking for people to still come, get signed up and get involved. It's not actually that hard to do. You can host a party, you can host a barbecue, you can have a dinner with friends, families, and neighbors. The whole idea is like emphasizing this idea that voting should be a social activity. It should be socialized. It should be celebratory, and it should be about doing it with other people.
And obviously, the folks try to make it very hard for them to do so. How many people do you think y'all have connected with thus far?
Oh my gosh! So we have we have thousands of events happening. I don't even remember the latest number. Something around 1,300. I think we already have committed. At each of those parties, we're engaging hundreds and thousands of people. So, I mean, you do the math, and we're making a pretty big impact thanks to those local organizations.
All right. How can folks get more information to find out where a party is taking place where they live?
You can find out where an event is taking place near you, or better yet, sign up to host an event at www.votetogetherusa.org.
All right, then. Well, Andrew, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And keep getting folks excited and focused.
Thank you. Thanks.
Folks, it is not too late to register in several states. Here are the deadlines over the next 4 days. In Nebraska, the deadline is October 26th. Washington State, October 29th. Utah and Connecticut, your deadline is October 30th. And also on Election Day, in these states, you can actually register and vote. Colorado, Washington, D.C., Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, Vermont, Wisconsin, and Wyoming as well. Plus, here are the states right now where early voting is taking place: Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, North Carolina, and Ohio as well. So, folks, please don't forget to do so. Let me first and foremost thank our panel for being here, Monique, Scott, and Julianne. Don't forget, folks, you can support Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. No, guys, kill the music. I'm not going there yet. So we're going to end the show by playing you this amazing Get Out the Vote video. Don't forget, if you want to actually see the full interview today with Megyn Kelly, go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. Watch it there, because, frankly, we don't get paid as much on Facebook. They basically pay us nothing. So we make more money on YouTube. So go to youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And again, if you want, yes, I did.
Right there.
I
That's
did.
economics.
Yes, very basic.
It's economics.
Very basic. Last month, through advertising on Facebook, we got $748. Last month, we got $13,000 through YouTube.
Did you get my contribution?
Damn it, go to YouTube. All right, so to watch, so you want to see any clips from our show? Go to YouTube. All right, folks. And also, we want you to join our fan club. We're trying to get 20,000 people to become contributors to the fan club. I have not seen your contribution, Scott.
I sent it last week. It was by check.
Yeah, we're double checking. 20,000 people we're trying to get in the course of a year to donate just $50 each. You want to donate more? That's great. But a minimum of $50 to help us fund Roland Martin Unfiltered to deliver what we're providing to you. And so, again, I'm about to go. We're going to end the show with this Get Out the Vote video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Holla!
Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it.
Look at me when I'm talking to you. You're telling me that my assault doesn't matter. That what happened to me doesn't matter. Women have been assaulted. How can you
I hope that you will all join us in our fight for the future.
Imagine waking up the morning after the November election and Donald Trump has lost control of the House. Oh my.